You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Oh, my God. It's not official until the opera lady says it's official. I don't know. I feel like an SNL skit. We have an opera lady. I don't know. Does anyone remember that joke or reference? Maybe not. Google it, folks, if you don't believe it. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys. For 15 years, we've bringing you the CEOs, the billionaires, the White House advisors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, the people who shape our thoughts and minds with their books and that come hot off the shelves. Even the Google print is so hot you can get high off the Google print. Or wait, I screwed that up. The Kindle print. Well, it's Friday. The brain's gone already on vacation. It's the Kindle print. You know the callback joke we do on the show. It doesn't work. But anyway, guys, we have the most amazing authors on the show. We have one joining us today to talk about his newest, hottest book that just came off the shelf. In fact, it is so hot that the Kindle's print will get you high. So just put your nose right up against the glass of your iPad and sniff really hard. The book is entitled The End of Reality: How 4 Billionaires Are Selling a Fantasy Future of the Metaverse, Mars, and Crypto. Jonathan Taplin joins us on the show today. He's going to be talking about his hottest new book. And when we announced the show, a lot of people are like, oh, man, it's so excited to hear from him and hear what he has to bring us on the show and the questions we're going to have for him and all that good stuff. In fact, I've been talking to him in the green room, and wow, he's led an interesting life. He is a public intellectual, writer, film producer, and scholar. He is the director emeritus of the Annenberg Innovation Lab at the University of Southern California. He was a professor at the USC Annenberg School in the field of international communication management and digital media entertainment until 2017. Since his graduation from Princeton University in 1969. Boy, that was the year before I was born. His extraordinary journey has put him on the crest of every major cultural wave in the past half century. He was a tour manager for Bob Dylan and the band, a producer of major films such as Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets, an executive at Merrill Lynch, creator of Internet's first video on-demand service, and cultural critic and author writing about technology in the new millennium. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. How are you?
Good to be here, Chris. I'm great.
There you go. You've lived a very long and interesting life with a lot of cool stuff going on there. How does it feel at your point in life?
Well, I'm feel lucky that I was able to work with some of the greatest artists in the history of at least our generation, and I continue to kind of try and make sense of this insane world that we're living in. And, that's what my new book is about.
There you go. Give us a .com. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs, please?
JohnTaplin.com.
There you go.
JONTAPLIN.
There you go. There'll be a link on the Chris Voss Show. And so what motivated you on to write The End of Reality: How 4 Billionaires Are Selling a Fantasy Future?
Well, I think we have two visions of what the future could be. One is one that I share, and probably you do too, which is that we can use the technologies and the best minds of our country to kind of fix the things that are wrong, whether that means having a more renewable energy system or fixing the mental health crisis or all the other things, housing, stuff like that. The other view, which is held by the 4 principles of my book, which is Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Andreessen, and Peter Thiel, is that the future is going to be dominated by artificial intelligence and robots. Mm-hmm. And that in 10 years, you will be sitting at home in your pajamas with nothing to do because the AI will have taken your job. And so, of course, you would like to spend 7 or 8 hours a day in the metaverse wearing a virtual reality helmet and pretending that you're dating Kim Kardashian. Um, so, the notion that these guys are putting forth is that there's a fantasy universe out there. So Elon Musk would like to go to Mars if only we would give him $10 trillion to do this mission, which of course he would make about 2 trillion in profit on.
Wow.
Um, or, Zuckerberg would like you to spend your day in the metaverse. Mark Andreessen thinks you're going to make a fortune off of NFTs, even though most of the people that bought those Bored Apes a year and a half ago couldn't sell them for anything right now.
Yeah.
And then there's Peter Thiel, who has the weirdest of all things. Peter thinks he can live to the age of 200.
Oh.
So he goes down to San Diego once a month and gets blood transfusions from 15-year-old boys under the notion that in the laboratory that he runs called Methuselah, the old rats that get blood transfusions from young rats live longer than the old rats that don't get the blood transfusions.
It's got to be really hard on the body. Jesus. I mean, but I don't know. I know. Who is it? The Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stone guitarist. I think he had a few blood transfusions over the years, but I think
Keith Richards.
I think it was just from too many drugs. But I mean, he's lived. I mean, he's at what, aged 1,000 right now or something,
right?
And those guys are still alive. Like, it's just funny. They're just laughing at everything. But this is why your book's important, because we really need to plan on what sort of world we're going to leave behind for Keith Richards.
Yeah, let me just throw one idea out to you. Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, which invented ChatGPT, said that he expects the marginal cost of intelligence to fall very close to zero within the next 10 years because of AI. He said the earning power of many, many workers would be drastically reduced in that scenario. It would result in a transfer of wealth from labor to the owners of capital, i.e., the owners of the AIs, so dramatic that it could be remedied only by a massive countervailing redistribution known as universal basic income.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that's a world that you or I want to live in.
Yeah.
And I think work helps define most of our lives.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for my check to come from trickle-down economics from Ronald Reagan. It's any day now. It's coming in the mail.
So, and quite honestly, I don't think, Congress, in the kind of disreputable state it's in right now, would be willing to put forth a universal basic income that would pay everybody $1,000 a month to stay home in their pajamas.
There you go. In fact, I'd be willing to pay them to stay home a month in their pajamas. I mean, at this point, you mentioned that AI might solve the mental health crisis. I thought we'd solve the mental health crisis just by invoking term limits.
Good idea.
I'll be here all week. So why did you only pick these 4 people? It seems like there's a lot of billionaires these days running around, running their mouth off, running social media and trying to be the corner of the future, I suppose. Why did you just pick these 4?
Well, because first off, I think they're the most influential. So Elon has 135 million followers on Twitter. Certainly Zuckerberg controls 3 of the largest social media platforms. Elon controls the 4th. Andreessen is a big investor in both Elon's Twitter and in Zuckerberg's Facebook company, Meta. And Peter Thiel is this kind of, he was obviously the first investor in Facebook. Close friend of Elon Musk, was partners with him in PayPal.
The PayPal gang, PayPal mafia, as they called it.
Yep. And he has a kind of outsized influence on these people in the sense that he was very hard right,
Yeah.
character from the beginning, and has slowly pulled all of them over to his side of the political aisle. I
Yeah.
mean, Elon is a kind of Republican troll right now, So,
Yeah.
uh, so that's why I picked them. I also picked them because they all have a kind of particularly authoritarian love of um, Trumpism and the kind of way the world is working,
Mhm.
and they also kind of like the way the government is dysfunctional,
Yeah.
because for them it means nobody's going to raise taxes on their outrageous $1 billion incomes, and nobody's going to regulate their companies.
Yeah, the more they can, ever since Citizens United and different things that have come before SCOTUS, by organizations stacking the court over 40 years, people don't realize these billionaires aren't like sitting around going, how can we be more charitable and give away everything and stuff, and the more they can live in a world that doesn't have regulations, that the more the U.S. probably represents countries that they can have more freedoms, whether it's environmentally dumping or exploiting workers, et cetera, et cetera. They're all for that. They're not. It's really a wonderment to me. Do you see these people that worship these folks? I have some friends that worship these folks almost like a cult or a religion. And I find it really disturbing, especially when I see men worshiping other men when they should just be their own kings. That's my opinion. But and giving this benevolence to them, that they're somehow these gracious, charitable beings that really care about you and I, the little people. What do you
So
think of
Peter
that?
Peter Thiel told the Wall Street Journal 2 years ago, only 2% of the people know what's going on. That's the scientists and the venture capitalists. And the
Mm,
rest of the population is a bunch of sheep. And
wow.
he said, quite frankly, democracy and capitalism are not compatible. And I'm on the side of capitalism. So,
Wow.
I mean, so they're not interested in democracy one bit.
Yeah.
Elon claims he's a libertarian, but he's actually a crony capitalist.
Yeah.
So all the money from SpaceX comes from our tax dollars funneled through NASA to him. And
Mhm.
as I said, he takes a 20% profit on every launch he does for NASA.
Wow.
Uh, all the money for his satellite company that we're paying, U.S. government is paying for the satellites for the Ukrainian army, and of course Elon believes he can turn it off whenever he wants to
Yeah, he puts his thumb on the scale on a
when they're
international war.
when they're getting too close to the Russians, because
Yeah.
he doesn't want to get Putin pissed off. Um, you know, so I think, and if you really think about Tesla, Tesla makes almost 3 billion a year selling green car credits to other companies that don't have as much electric vehicles as he does. So besides the fact that the government gives you a huge tax break if you buy an EV, so
Mhm.
he's a crony capitalist.
Yeah.
He exploits art, and his final notion is, hey, just give me 10 trillion and I'll go to Mars. For what? We don't know. There's
Yeah.
no oxygen up there. There's nothing, in the soil. We've been digging the Martian soil with rovers for 10 years, and we haven't found anything of any interest whatsoever.
Well, the Martians live here, according to Hollywood. So there you go. They're in the sea or something. I don't know, whatever. I was just listening to Sam Harris's podcast where he was arguing with Mark Andreessen the other night about AI, and they did have a little bit of a debate. And Mark is really pushing the AI thing. And seems to have a very utopian sort of, although he claims he doesn't, but he has a very utopian sort of, it's going to be all, beautiful smelling flowers and whatever. And he seems dismissive of any sort of implication there's a downside to it. And of course, he's he's vested in it up to his eyeballs. So it's hard to say why you're clearly have a biased sort of outlook in life. As you delve into each of these characters in the book, what you call the four, and you show how their monopoly has brought on, I guess, middle class wage stagnation, the destruction of what we call Main Street. I've watched that happen since the '80s. The big boxing of everything in America, pretty much. What do you feel that it's getting better? Or it's getting worse? Are these people just going to become more and more powerful, or is there a way we can stop them or slow them
I
down?
think there's a way to stop them.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, when I started writing this book 3 years ago, these guys were on top of the world.
Yeah.
I was at the Boston Book Festival last weekend in a big room. Maybe there were 800 people in the room, and there were myself and two other critics of big tech. And when the name Elon Musk was mentioned, there were boos. When the name Mark Zuckerberg was mentioned, there were boos. So something has shifted.
Yeah.
People are realizing these people have too much power. They're
Mhm.
realizing that social media has been a net negative for society. If you look at the chart of teenage suicide, self-harm, all of that,
Mhm.
it all started in 2011 when Facebook put the like button on, and 2012 when Facebook bought Instagram, and then essentially Twitter did the same thing.
I would argue with you the start of social media in and of itself, like Twitter in 2008, 2006, whenever it launched in 2006, but it really didn't scale until about 2008, 2009. I would say social media is the Pandora's box that opened up the worst of the worst in our nature.
Totally. I mean,
Mhm.
think about this. Rupert Murdoch paid $780 million as a fine for defaming the voting machine company, right?
Mhm.
So there was far more nonsense and disinformation about that voting machine company on Twitter and far more on Facebook than there was on Fox News. But neither of them could be sued
Yeah.
because they have, given by the government, thanks unfortunately to Al Gore and Bill Clinton, they have something called a safe harbor liability shield. So
Mhm.
you can't sue Facebook for telling lies. You can't sue Twitter for publishing lies because they claim, hey, it's not us, it's the users, and we have no control over them.
Yeah.
That's not true, of course. You
Yeah.
can't post porn to
Yeah.
Twitter. They'll block it.
Yeah.
You
They'll
can't
suspend
post,
your account if you don't do certain things.
yeah,
So,
you can't
yeah.
post porn to Facebook.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's kind of sad. Andreessen, you mentioned him. He wrote this kind of screed last week called Techno Optimism.
Mm.
And he basically said that we believe there is no material problem, whether created by nature or by technology, that cannot be solved with more technology. Of course, if you think about the problems he's trying to solve with technology, one of his biggest companies is called Anduril, which manufactures most of the killer robots that the U.S. is testing right now. That is autonomous weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these aren't drones with a controller in a trailer in Las Vegas flying them. These are instruments in which the AI makes the decision to pull the trigger. And
What could
most
go
of the
wrong?
people I read think these things should be banned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what could go wrong, really? I mean, yeah, what could go wrong? It sounds like Terminator all over again.
Yeah. But that's their dream.
Mhm.
They think they're Superman.
Yeah.
You talked about it being a cult.
Yeah.
These guys actually would like to be gods,
And
and they actually think that in the future, near future, they will be able to merge their brains and their consciousness into the computer. This is known as the singularity,
Mhm.
and they will be gods from their point of view.
Wow. I wish I could have that level of narcissism and a fuck you money that I could buy into that sort of thing. I've been running companies since I was 18, and I believe in capitalism, but I do believe there's something that's called unbridled capitalism that is too much. There has to be a balance. You can't have uncontrolled, an oligarchy in essence is what some people think we're in, and maybe they're right. It's beyond my pay grade, but it has been interesting, the narcissistic nature of the billionaires and people that we've seen how you saw how much their wealth grew over COVID. Well, everyone else got diluted. You see the like I said, I watched over 80 years the trickle down economics and the wiping out, the slow erosion of the middle class. And, you see this now with society and people in our society that think maybe populism or fascism or authoritarianism might be a good thing, because that's what happens when you beat down a society so much that they've got nothing left. They'll believe in just about any strongman that will come along and promise them that they'll fix everything and return the balance of the natural order. And it's even more dark that we turn to another billionaire.
Yeah.
Like it's like a line in Fight Club that you can convert where it says, "Is another billionaire really what we need?"
Andreessen said something that I thought was kind of interesting. He
Mhm.
said, reality had 5,000 years to get good and is clearly still woefully lacking for most people.
Yeah.
We should build, and we are building, online worlds that make life and work and love making wonderful for everyone, no matter what level of reality deprivation they find themselves in.
Mhm.
Now, those people you've been talking about who've been left behind, the people that my colleague at Princeton, Angus Deaton, calls the deaths of despair, the
Wow.
people who are sitting in some shack in West Virginia playing video games all day and snorting Oxycontin.
That's Fridays around here.
Are they reality deprived? I guess so. But
Hmm.
ultimately, the ultimate reality deprivation is to kill yourself, to
Yeah.
drink yourself to death. And I am not a doomer. I actually believe that our society can make itself much better.
Mhm.
I'm a child of the counterculture. I
Mhm.
grew up in the 60s. I started working for Bob Dylan in 1965 and worked, took him to England in 1969. And there was a kind of hopeful a culture, the times they are a changing,
Mhm.
that we can make change. But what's problem right now is there's this kind of nihilism that infects everything.
Mhm.
I mean, think about the television shows that you and I have watched for the last 20 years. So Sopranos came on in 2000. And then we had Mad Men and Breaking Bad and Succession and all these shows in which the protagonist is a terrible person in a brutal struggle with other terrible people.
Mhm.
And who's going to emerge victorious from these struggles without any morality?
Mhm.
And then sometime 15 years later in 2016, it's not surprising to me that people would say, well, maybe Tony Soprano should be president. And that's what we got. We got a gangster president, you know.
It's there's something interesting about the Machiavellianism of what and patriarchy and what's gone on since the 60s, when we saw the rise of feminism and emotionalism. And it's kind of interesting how, if you study strongmen, fascism, authoritarianism, populism, it comes from a rise of a more effeminate society. and when the family starts to fall apart, when you see men start to fall apart. And if you really study the arc of it, I believe, and how we look to patriarchy, because you'll see people bash patriarchy, but they'll support religion, which, if you really understand, it's a patriarchy. And so what you referenced there with the Tony Soprano and all that sort of thing, there, part of what spins into this failure of the middle class and the lower class, into the point where they'll enact a Mussolini. You're seeing this in Europe with a couple of different countries like Poland and
Right.
I forget the other one, who's now put a populist president. In fact, Mussolini's party is now in charge of Italy again after
Yeah.
40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
It's a return to extreme masculinity and a clickback, jerkback. And I think some people worship people like the four that you mentioned because they see them as the rock stars, the masculine men, the patriarchy people, and that's why they worship them. I've always thought it's interesting too in American society how we say there's kind of a mentality, and I think they've done studies on it, where a lot of people don't want rich people to be regulated because we believe in that thing in American society that, hey, we can all be rich and we can all be millionaires too, much like Fight Club. We're all going to be millionaires, and then we're finding out that we can't be, and we're very angry about it.
Right.
But people will say they don't want the rich people regulated because they anticipate that they're all going to get there and all be millionaires someday, and they don't want regulations when they get there either. And so there's this reluctance to hold people accountable. Yeah, we live in a really interesting world. Like, I actually heard a senator the other day, a couple weeks ago, on Face the Nation, literally say the quiet part out loud and say, maybe it is time for a populist American. And I'm like, are you freaking out of your freaking mind? And that's not from a House member. That's from a senator.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's an interesting world that we live in. Is the best result to educate people with books like yours and have these discussions to where we go, hey, maybe we should quit worshiping these people, as I've talked about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I would hope that the resistance takes lots of forms.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes the form of people making. I was in Nashville 2 weeks ago for the Americana Music Awards and the Americana Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a bunch of people who are making acoustic music, playing banjos and fiddles and guitars. And I swear to God, you could have been in 1938 in terms of the sense of it, close harmony singing, the direct line from Bill Monroe and the Carter family and Johnny Cash and early work like that to this work. And these people are trying to preserve something that's really good. And I was at a restaurant on this book tour in Maine called Aragosta, run by a young woman. And within 30 miles of her restaurant, she has this whole commune of farmers that grow the vegetables, grow the cows, grow the sheep, grow the goats, that supply her restaurant under exactly the principles that she wants. And it's like this magical place, and it got a Michelin star. It's so good.
Wow.
So, I mean, I think what we need is a counterculture. It certainly worked in the 60s. I mean, if you think about what the life was, the kind of singularity of the world in the late 1950s, the kind of conformism and everything.
Yeah.
And then you get an Allen Ginsberg, or you get a Bob Dylan, or you get a Joan Baez, or and something changes, and then that leads to the Beatles, and then that leads to this total explosion of new stuff. Mm-hmm. And if it hadn't been for Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy getting killed in '68, I think there would have been a very different outcome for the next 10 years.
Huh. Now, do you think it would have been improved outcome, or?
Yeah, I think it would have been better. I think, I know that on the college campuses in '67 and '68, there was a real sense that the war was going to end because there were so many people in the streets demonstrating against it, and that there people really had power. And then when Bobby Kennedy came out against the war and said he was going to run against Lyndon Johnson, the sitting president, that was a big change. But then, of course, they both got killed. And, for a lot of people like myself, we had our heart broken. It's a screw politics.
Yeah.
I'll just join the rock and roll circus and smoke some pot and just live my life and not have my heart broken in politics.
And then kind of open the door to Nixon and kind of that whole new dystopian darkness.
Totally opened the door to Nixon.
Yeah. And it kind of was a clapback of power of the authoritarian state. It went back to law and order and let's get everybody back in line. It was an interesting time. Do you see that happening in today's world? I mean, the one person who rules the world right now in music and seems to be what's her face?
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. So
or Beyonce. Hey, look.
Are we gonna get them to counterculture changes and usher in the new future?
Think about it. That in its own way is somewhat counterculture to what the dominant force was, Jason Aldean, you come into my little town, I'll kick your ass, or Young Thug, this is how many people I killed. And so the two women who dominated the concert stage this summer, Beyonce called her series Renaissance, Rebirth, right? And certainly Taylor Swift is all about being vulnerable and admitting you can't hold on to a boyfriend and just being open like that. And so I would rather have that than have, the alternative.
But you say that what we need to usher in a new change to our sort of IBM man that we have nowadays with these four.
Okay, so it's just simple.
Okay.
Everything you've ever written and probably everything you've ever recorded has probably been taken into an AI somewhere.
Yeah, no.
Without your permission and without giving you any compensation for that. So you take Stable Diffusion. That's a big AI image generator thing. What did they do? They took 12 million images that were all copyrighted from Getty Images and downloaded them into the machine to teach the machine, okay, this is what Joni Mitchell looks like. This is what Dwight D. Eisenhower looks like. Just teaching it that. So now I can ask Stable Diffusion, give me a picture of Joni Mitchell in an 1840s saloon in the West, and it will do that, right? But how did it do that? It's because it used real photographers' work to train the model for free, without permission. The same thing is happening in the Google LLM for music, taking all the music off of YouTube and just using it to train. I'm on the board of the Authors Guild. We're suing OpenAI because they've taken everybody's novels and put them in the machine without permission and without any payment.
I thought that was really interesting. There's been a lot of chatter about you guys doing that. I forget the author who, or one of the authors talked about it, a young lady. It's, I think Elon Musk just made a tweet or comment saying how basically they, ChatGPT and other these AI models basically scraped the internet and now are reselling the internet back to itself.
Yeah, that's true. He does say some honest things once in a while, but he also says he wants regulation of AI, and he doesn't want regulation from AI.
He doesn't. He just wants regulation from. To my understanding, a bunch of the companies right now, one of the things they're lobbying for is for the big successful companies to have access to AI, and to cut out the little guys so they can dominate it and monopolize it, which is. It's pretty interesting. So as you flush out these four people and call them out on their BS, what's the future hold? Do you give us any tools in the book to hold these people accountable, to maybe hold ourselves accountable. I believe you get the government you deserve. I believe if you don't like who's in Washington, go stand in front of a fucking mirror.
Right.
My mom was a teacher for what 20-25 years, and she would call me up and be like, yep, the GOP legislatures have taken our funding in. They've doubled our school size. You look at what goes on in some of the red states at the poor education of people, and then you look at how people vote and what they do, and you go, well, geez, I mean, if I could have $1 for everybody who cites the Constitution in some sort of political argument, who's never fucking read the Constitution, I'd be rich, man.
Right.
I mean, we seem to be becoming a dumber society as we go along, and social media isn't helping.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. Government is probably the only hope in the near term to regulate these giant monopolies.
Mm-hmm.
So Google is in an antitrust trial right now. Meta is probably going to be in one in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a start. It's a small start, but I also think there's personal stuff you can do. I went on a vacation with my children and grandchildren last summer to a place where there was no internet service, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. And the kids are 15, 13, and 10, right?
Uh-huh.
So they're all, for the first day, were having a freak out. Nothing on my device. I'm not getting any text messages.
Did you do that on purpose, by the way?
Yes. After the first day, they put their phones in their luggage, turned them off, and all of a sudden became remarkably present.
Wow.
With their parents. And their parents saying, what is going on here? They're at the dinner table and talking about things, and they're looking at this beautiful nature, wildlife that we're out in, and it was kind of a cool thing, So I've suggested to people that at least at the minimum, everyone try a notion I've called the digital Sabbath, which just means take one day off a weekend, and everybody in your family put your devices away for the whole day and just talk to each other.
What were you saying? I was checking my email. What was that? No, I'm just kidding.
Because it's funny you talked about narcissism.
Yeah.
Right. So these guys are all narcissists, right? And they're all on the spectrum, and they're all a little nutty, and they all had terrible childhoods. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that their main money comes from services to do nothing but feed narcissism.
Yeah.
What is Instagram? It's a narcissism machine.
We've raised the most narcissistic generation ever. And social media just feeds it.
Yeah.
Like you said, with the likes earlier.
Yeah.
And everything else. And it's a real problem. It's reshaping our society. It's reshaping relationships. It's reshaping our ability to grow as a culture from having kids and families and everything else. I'm 55 now. And I've been single all my life, and dating in my 50s. I'm seeing mothers come out of their first divorce at 50 with a half-cooked family. And I'm like, when I was in my 30s, I saw people coming out of their first divorce. Why am I seeing people coming out of their first divorce at 50s with a half-cooked family instead of their 20s?
Right.
And it has some really interesting proponents to it. It was a Morgan Stanley published the report that by 2030, 45% of our women between the ages of 25 and 45, the childbearing ages, will be childless and not have children. And it's already true in Britain, and not having really any support for having relationships. And part of it, I think, is the narcissism of social media. And of course, constantly going on there and getting attention and validation where, I get the plight of young men and some of the things that we've seen in discussions with them and going into college or not going into college, actually, not starting families, not being interested in doing stuff. also they can't afford it because of some of the things we discussed here economically. There's some impact coming from the narcissistic nature of what social media has done. It is a Pandora's box that went from like, hey, the world's going to be one, we're all going to be singing John Lennon songs, imagine, to now everyone's, and the death of expertise, where everyone thinks they're an expert in everything, and really they're just professionals in Dunning-Kruger disease.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like the narcissists are worshiping the narcissists at this point of the four that you mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. It's a cult.
It is a cult.
The cult of narcissism.
Yeah.
There you go. There's your next book title.
Led by the narcissist in chief, Elon Musk.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I was just reading, I think yesterday, about how the traffic has fallen off by over 20%, even more on his on Twitter X, or bankruptcy, whatever it's being called this week, or next week. People watch our shows 10 years from now, they're going to be like, yeah, it was bankruptcy. And they were talking about how there's a 20% drop off in the traffic on X, and the massive amounts of advertisers have fled, but somehow his following and engagement rate on Twitter is up 69% because he, told the engineers to game it that way. Totally. Is that kind of incredibly narcissistic?
No, I mean, look, the funniest thing to me, I mean, it's sad, but it's, he called out the Anti-Defamation League about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they were trying to ruin his business.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? So when he came back on, and when he took control of the platform, first thing he was Kanye West and all the other neo-Nazis back on the platform. And so then the platform became flooded with anti-Semitic content. Mm-hmm. So the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, has the temerity to point this out to advertisers.
Mm-hmm.
And Elon says it's their fault. It's in other words, shoot the messenger. He's not willing to take any responsibility for what he did and for what all, and as you know from the last 2 weeks, the disinformation has gotten even worse since the Hamas Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it was really awful, and it turns out the Anti-Defamation League was spot on.
Yeah,
because of the stuff that's gone on there. In fact, I think he promoted a tweet or two, or retweeted a tweet or two that were complete falsehoods. So he's not helping either at all.
No.
Yeah.
Look, there's a Yale professor who studies fascism called Tim Snyder, and he says to abandon facts is to abandon freedom.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. Mm-hmm. The biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are the biggest wallets paying for the blinding lights, but they don't believe in truth at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the precursor for real fascism.
You know what I'm interested in hearing about? Peter Thiel evidently came out this week that he's an FBI informant for something that went on with the Trump administration. I'm really curious to find out more about that. And I suppose eventually it will come out.
Me too.
I didn't see him as a turncoat, given I can still see his speech at the Republican convention 2015-16. And I know how much, he actually really hurt Facebook by trying to lean on them. I actually got my Facebook account suspended for a couple days because I talked about white people, and Peter Thiel had petitioned that if we're going to have racial, we're going to be sensitive to racial stuff, we need to put white people in there as an endangered species as well. And so I literally, when I want to talk about white people and, issues that are going on in our culture and stuff, I have to use an asterisk when I write the word white to this day. Otherwise I risk getting suspended because, we're a persecuted class, clearly, according to Peter Thiel. So there you go. Well, give us your final thoughts and pitch on the book as we go out, so people will pick it up. And I think education is the what do they always say? Sunlight is the best cleanser.
Yeah. Well, my final thoughts are that we can fix this. There's nothing that's in front of us that without a little bit of control, some of it which may come from regulation, but some is just personal people saying, "Hey, I don't need to be on Twitter. I'm quitting." Um, Albert Camus, the French writer, wrote a fabulous thing about the role of people and in kind of it was a book called The Rebel, and he said, "We are at the extremities now. At the end of this tunnel of darkness, however, there is invariably a light which we already divine and for which we only have to fight to ensure its coming. All of us among the ruins are preparing a renaissance beyond the limits of this nihilism." We're living in a nihilistic age. We can get beyond this.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, the culture leaders, people like yourself, are going to have to be the people who show us the way out of this tunnel of darkness.
Mhm. To quote the dude, "Don't be a nihilist." Did he say that in the Big Lebowski? I don't remember. There you go. It's been wonderful to have you on, Jonathan, and
Thanks,
it's an
Chris.
important discussion to have. And I wish we quit worshiping these people. It just makes me insane that we look at these people. I knew people that work with Steve Jobs. Steve was not a sort of person that anyone should look up to in his private life. Was he a great businessman? Kinda. Do you feel that stealing from all the engineers of Silicon Valley by forming a quiet monopoly to limit everyone's income and trading of jobs and ban people? It's interesting how we worship some of these people, and there's some really dark shit that goes on behind the scenes that needs to be exposed. So, do you plan on going to Davos with your book and hanging out, maybe doing some book signings?
I don't think I'd get the invitation, Al.
There you go. Just go anyway. Crash the party, man. Crash the party. Hey, you guys wanna buy some books on billionaires? There you go. See what works. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on. We certainly appreciate it,
It's been
and
fun.
continued success in your thing. .coms wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs, please.
JohnTaplin.com.
There you go. Order it up, folks, wherever fine books are sold. The End of Reality: How 4 Billionaires Are Selling a Fantasy Future of the Metaverse, Mars, and Crypto. And, as always, as the attorneys say in Latin, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Subscribe to that big LinkedIn newsletter in the 130,000 group on LinkedIn. Go to Chris Voss 1 on the tickety talkety, as the kids like to call it. They don't like to call it that. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.